Delaware is on the brink of passing a regulation that would allow children to change their gender without parental permission or even knowledge. Regulation 225 would order all schools to let kids pick their bathroom, locker room, sports team, preferred name, regardless of their biological gender. The regulation would also let students choose their own race. And if the school wishes, parents will be told nothing. Mark Purpura is president of Equality Delaware Foundation, and he joins us today. Mark, thanks for coming on.
Hi, Tucker. Thank you for having me.
So we don't let kids really make any decisions without their parents because their parents are in charge of them. Why would they be encouraged to make a decision this profound without letting their parents know?
Well, Tucker, the regulation doesn't encourage children to make any decision. It simply allows them to identify their gender or their race for school records purposes. The school is permitted under the regulation to seek the permission of parents before they make that change. And it suggests also that if the school decides to seek the permission of the parents, that they consider the health, safety, and well-being of the child before they do that. The sad reality, Tucker...
But hold on, but the school is not the parents. The teachers didn't give birth to the child, haven't raised the child. How could teachers justify not telling parents why are they not required to tell parents immediately?
Sure, Tucker. The simple fact is that some parents are simply not going to be supportive of their child, and it may endanger the child's safety or well-being to involve that parent in that.
Who makes that decision? Who makes that decision?
Well, the school would make the decision, but I think what's missing here is that.
No, what's missing here is outrage. So let me supply some. The school has no right to take away parental decision-making from parents. The children do not belong to school administrators. They are members of the family from which they came. How dare a school take that prerogative away from parents? Where do they get the right to do that?
Tucker, they're not taking the prerogative away from parents.
Well, obviously they are.
First of all, it's only in rare circumstances that a school would come to a determination that involving the parent is going to endanger the safety and well-being of the child.
But who has the right to decide that? Hold on, slow down. Who has the right to decide that, and where does that right come from? Where does a school administrator have the right to override parental judgment in the case of a child?
Tucker, it's not about overriding parental judgment.
Well, of course it is.
No, it's about protecting the safety and well-being of that child.
Says who on the basis of what? Wait, hold on. This is it. Hold on, slow down. I'm a parent. Stop. I'm a parent of 4. I can tell you the most sacrosanct right you have as a parent is to influence the development of your child. In order to violate that right, you need a court order. But you're saying that a school official can just decide it's not in the child's interest, and I'm asking you where you get the right to violate millennia of sacred tradition and make that decision in place of a parent. Simple question. Where's that right come from?
Tucker, the child has a right to dignity and respect in school. And they shouldn't have to choose between that dignity and respect and being unsafe at home, being subject to potential physical violence, mental anguish.
But somebody has to make the decision about, hold on, somebody has to make the decision. There's a subjective decision to be made about what's best for the child. And that decision is always made by parents unless a court determines that the parents are unable to make the right decision. It takes a court to do that.
Tucker,
yes.
We send children to schools, and administrators and teachers make those decisions every day.
About what race and sex the child is? Are you joking?
No,
this has never been tried in any place in the world. And for you to pretend it's no big deal and that nobody's rights are getting violated, yes, they are. Parental rights are being ignored because of political extremists, I hate to put you in that category, who think their views are more important than the rights of parents. And I think we should at least acknowledge that. This regulation is similar to policies that have been implemented across the country. In Oregon and Washington and Massachusetts. Oh, going back like about 6 months. This has never happened in human history. We didn't used to believe 3 years ago that you could change your sex or your race. So this is all brand new. So at least pay me the compliment of acknowledging this is brand new. This has never been tried. It's not brand new. Yes, Tucker, it's not brand new. Changing your race is an old thing. Well, how far back does that extend? Tell me the history. Is that in British common law? What are you talking about?
It's not changing your race, Tucker. It's identifying your race. It's identifying your race.
Okay, look, we're not having a biology conversation. That's another segment. But I'm just telling you as a factual matter, no society has ever done that until very, very recently. This never happened. So at least acknowledge this is brand new.
It's happening in school districts, and it's being implemented seamlessly across school districts across the country.
But the rights of parents over their own children are being violated because of activists. And I'm going to stand up and say it. I don't care. I'm not afraid of you. And I think it's fair to say that parents are losing their rights in this over their own children. And I think that that's something we need to think about. And I'm sorry you disagree.
I think that we are on the same page that parental involvement is very important. It's only in very rare circumstances.
But who makes that decision? And where do they get the right to make that decision? I don't know if you have children, but can I just say, I don't like the way you're parenting. And I think it's really in the child's interest to not let you know about a profound life decision that kid is making. I don't think you'd like that. I think you'd need a court order to do that.
This does not prohibit communication between the parent and the child.
The school hides this from the parent. They have an obligation. They're not their children. Those children do not belong to the school. They belong to the family from which they came. I just wish you would acknowledge that, and we could move from there, but you won't. And you try to bully people into going along with it, and I won't be.
There are plenty of circumstances, Tucker, where school counselors or other people in conversations.
It's not their child. A school counselor doesn't get to decide. We're going to have to stop there. Mark, the Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund, after the guidelines retraction, Weiss denounced the administration's states' rights position as nonsense. Jillian Weiss joins us now. Jillian, thanks a lot for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
So I believe, for whatever it's worth, in politeness and decency and not making people uncomfortable, especially children. I have 4. But I also believe in honesty, and so I just want to get to what exactly this means. So I'm a 47-year-old man. I think that's pretty obvious. If I were to decide tomorrow that I was a 47-year-old woman, should I be allowed to go shower in a women's locker room?
The idea that there's no objective factors to be considered in who is transgender and how we determine bathroom use is really not the way that this works. The fact is that people make this decision after a lot of serious consideration. They see medical doctors, there's psychologists involved, there's a lot to think about. It's not an easy process. As someone who's gone through that, I can tell you, you just don't decide tomorrow. So that's really not the way it works.
But what if I did decide tomorrow? Should I be, and it was totally sincere? Or, by the way, how would you know whether it was sincere or not, or anyone know? Only I can make that decision. And what if I did? Would I be allowed to go and shower in a women's locker room? And if not, why not?
Well, I think the answer is no. And, for example, we have the Gavin Grimm case, which, as you know, is coming up to the Supreme Court very soon. The ACLU just put out its brief in that case. And, they went through what he had to address. He changed his name. He had medical doctors. He had letters from psychologists and so on. It wasn't the kind of thing where he just came in and said, now I'm going to be using the boys' room.
But let's go through because there's a lot at stake here, and you know this because you do it for a living. There's a lot of money at stake, and there's a lot bigger issues at stake. The definition of gender itself, which is at the center of any society. So what are the absolute standards that are required for a person to change his or her sex?
There is an organization called the World Professional Association of Transgender Health, which has a series of standards of care. We're on number 7 now, or 8 is coming up. And so this is something that doctors and medical people, psychologists have worked with for years, and there is a whole protocol. I can't give you the entire thing right now, but I think it's important to understand that there is something called transgender, and we have been here forever. We've been going to the bathroom forever.
But I'm not contesting any of that. And just to be totally clear, I'm not attacking anyone.
Yes.
But I think it's fair, because so much is at stake, to get much more precise than you are getting. So what exactly are the standards? And are they legal standards, or are they standards that you agree with? I mean, what exactly are the actual standards? Because, again, a lot of money is at stake here.
Yes. Well, the medical standards require seeing a therapist for a certain period of time before cross-sex hormones will be prescribed, a certain amount of time living as the opposite sex before certain kinds of medical treatment and surgery would be permitted. The other thing to keep in mind is that the courts have been parsing this for the last 15, 20 years. And so if somebody is being stereotyped because of their sex, because they're not perceived to fit in with appropriate masculinity or femininity, because of whatever people perceive as their birth sex, that is something that's prohibited by the anti-discrimination statute.
Right, so that's the anti-discrimination statute, but you still haven't explained, I've asked you a bunch, what the legal standards are, because I don't think that there are any, and here's why that's a concern. So the federal government spends over $11 billion every year on sex-specific programs, and I'm sure you know what they are. The Small Business Administration, among many others, gives a ton of money to people because they are women. And so how are we supposed to navigate that if and let's be honest with each other, there are no standards actually, other than I say that I'm of a different sex. How are we supposed to navigate this, and what's going to prevent charlatans from jumping in and taking all that cash?
Well, let me give you an example. In the field of athletics, there are standards that have been developed for when someone is permitted to move into a particular single-sex activity. It involves how long they have been on hormones, how long their transition has been, whether or not they have the strength equivalent to, that, like in women's sports, for example. So there are standards that have been developed. Now, I don't know all of the details of that exactly, but you're asking, for example, how do we...
There is no absolute standard that's been developed, as you know. I mean, look, this is your job. You know that that's not true. There isn't. The WNBA doesn't have the same standard as the Olympics, as Notre Dame women's field hockey. I mean, there is no absolute standard.
Well, if that's what you're saying, is there an absolute standard? You're correct. Yeah. There is not an absolute standard. We are working this out as a society. It doesn't mean put transgender people back in the closet or tell transgender youth just, fend for yourself.
But nobody's suggesting that, at least on this show. What I'm suggesting is an adult look at this issue, and yet whenever you bring it up, like, what does this really mean? And can you actually change your sex biologically? You're denounced as, it's like a hater. And I'm just speaking for myself when I say that has nothing to do with it. I think it's fair to ask these questions. And so when are we going to find out exactly what it means to be a woman or a man?
Well, let me just suggest this. I have a list here of 25 studies that have been done over the last 15 years by scientists, peer-reviewed journals, discussing exactly what it means to be transgender, when someone is transitioning, the difference in the basal ganglia of the stria terminalis, the neuron density in the brain, and so on. I'm sorry for being very technical. The point is there are biological differences.
You're big. I mean, let me ask you this. Can you ascertain a person's sex with a blood test throughout life, from birth until death, and will that result remain consistent?
No, not with a blood test.
Not with a blood test. Okay, I don't know if that's correct, actually. But the point is, look, do you agree that, and we'll just leave it here, but do you agree that until there is a commonly recognized, legally recognized standard for sex, what constitutes a man and a woman, that we ought to slow down a little bit, stop building up all these anti-discrimination statutes before we can agree on who is being discriminated against, who meets the standard?
We've had these laws in the books for the past, 40 years. They have come to understand that this includes transgender people. For the last 15 years, we're all over society. We are going to the bathroom. We are showering. We are in athletics. So you can't put us back.
But no one's suggesting that, and you're dodging the question because you don't have an answer, and I just hope that you'll take this seriously, because I think it's a serious issue, and I hope that you will too. It's not just a matter of saying, we're here, we're not going away. It's a series of doing...
But you're saying until we have a standard, until we have an absolute standard, we can't do anything, and so I disagree with that.
I'm saying don't give $11 billion away to people who are faking. Like, what are we even talking about?
Who's faking?
I still don't know.
Where's your evidence of faking? Tell me who faked it, and then we can discuss it.
Jillian, thanks for joining us.